Today on the newscast, is the Iranian regime ready to open up a new front in its ring of fire against Israel? Find out what Iran and the Houthis are saying about their plans for the Jewish state. That's coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Today is a very significant day for the Iranian regime, its proxies across the Middle East, and really its allies around the world. Today, Friday, May 7th, marks the annual Quds Day. Now, this was a creation of the Iranian regime back in 1979. The godfather of the Iranian Revolution, the Ayatollah Khomeini, created this annual event, Quds Day, to basically declare the soon-to-be destruction of the state of Israel and to show, in his words, solidarity with the oppressed Palestinian people in their struggle against the Zionist entity, as he called Israel. So every year for the past 42 years, we've had this Quds Day event. It's usually marked by large rallies, of course, in Tehran, but also in other Arab capitals, and even here in the West, in places like London in previous years, we've seen Iranian and Hezbollah sympathizers waving Hezbollah flags on Quds Day and vowing the destruction of the world's one and only Jewish state. So that's Quds Day for you in a nutshell. Because of COVID, we don't have the mass demonstrations that we would usually have, but still a day that is, of course, marked by the Iranian regime. We had a speech delivered by the Ayatollah Khamenei, the current supreme leader of Iran. And folks, the general basic message from the supreme leader of Iran, talking about the downfall of Israel, the Zionist entity. Now, if you watched our live stream yesterday here on YouTube, you can check it out in our archives. This was a very interesting week, and I hit on this yesterday. Statements all in the same day, Wednesday, May 5th, coming from the deputy head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, from the leader of Hezbollah, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, and from the leader of the Houthi movement in Yemen, Abdul Malik Al-Houthi. He's a guy we haven't heard very much from on the public stage in terms of statements, but all of them gave statements or made speeches on Wednesday, May 5th, geared towards Quds Day today. But isn't it interesting, folks, that Iran and two of its most lethal proxy, for sure, Hezbollah, and an increasingly lethal proxy in the Houthis, more on that in a second, all three, the master and its proxies, released statements on the same day, had to be coordinated, to my mind, folks, all with the same message, the destruction of Israel. Now, we have come to expect this, of course, from the Iranian regime. After all, they're the founders of Quds Day, and Hezbollah as well, but the Houthis, very interesting. The deputy head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, Hossein Salami, yes, his last name really is Salami, gave a speech saying that Israel is basically a one-attack nation. One attack could end the state of Israel. That's what he said. It echoed similar comments about 20 years ago from the former Iranian president, Hashemi Rafsanjani, who called Israel, quote, a one-bomb country, meaning one nuclear bomb would do the job. Now, some 75% of the Israeli population lives in and around that Tel Aviv metropolitan area along the Mediterranean coast, so I'm guessing that's what they are referring to. But, so an Iranian general says that. The leader of Hezbollah, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, echoes him on the same day, saying Israel will soon expire. It will be eliminated. And then the Houthis. Now, the Houthis have been laser focused, as we've told you many times here in the newscast, on Saudi Arabia. On literally a daily basis, the hybrid model of drones and missiles bombarding the Saudi royal kingdom, everything from royal palaces to oil facilities to military and civilian targets. The Houthis, with the full backing of the Iranian regime, and being equipped and armed and funded by Iran and directed by Iran, is literally directing an onslaught on a daily basis against Saudi Arabia. We know that. But what about Israel? Folks, that came into focus on Wednesday, May 5th. Could the Houthis be ready to perhaps expand their theater of operations and target Israel. Now, two things to keep in mind. Number one, that would be a very foolish move on the part of the Houthis. With severe repercussions, Israel would not remain silent in the face of any Houthi aggression coming from Yemen, which is again about 1,000 miles south where the Houthis are based of the southernmost point of Israel. That's number one. But number two, the Houthis must do what their Iranian masters tell them to do. Just as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, those Iraqi Shia militias in Iraq, all Iranian controlled, all comprising that ring of fire, that Iranian ring of fire that surrounds Israel. So if Iran says to the Houthis, it's time to target the Zionist entity with drones and missiles, the Houthis are going to do it. To the point, how deeply is Iran entrenched? And I'll get to the speech in a second, which is really the main reason I'm talking about this, the speech from the leader of the Houthis. But a quick point for you folks. To give you an idea of the extent of the Iranian control now among the Houthis in Yemen, we have Arab media reports and Yemeni opposition politicians saying, hey, the leader of Iran's Quds force, Hassan Erbo, ERBO, is on the ground in Yemen right now, and basically he's the de facto ruler of the Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. That is how involved Iran is in Yemen right now. This is becoming southern Lebanon part two, where we have Hezbollah, obviously, an Iranian power base in southern Lebanon at Israel's northern doorstep. It seems to me that Yemen, at least the Houthi-controlled areas, and they control a lot of territory more and more every day in that country, is becoming Iran southwest. I call Lebanon, southern Lebanon, Iran west, Yemen to the southwest. They are duplicating, or at least they're trying to and having great success at it, what they have done in southern Lebanon. But that speech, here it is, Wednesday, May 5th, the leader of the Houthis, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, said that Israel, and again, on the same day as speeches from Iranian officials, top Iranian officials, Hezbollah leader Nasrallah, al-Houthi says that Israel is a cancerous tumor that must be removed from the region. Who does that sound like? The Iranian regime. He's taking the words out of Khamenei's mouth. We've heard that many times from Iranian leaders over the past 42 years. That's number one. Number two, he said that Israel threatens the entire Muslim world, and the entire Muslim world must unite to eliminate Israel and take back Jerusalem, or Al-Quds, as they call it. Again, who does that sound like? It sounds like the supreme leader of Iran. Where are the Houthis getting their talking points? One guess, Tehran. Lastly, al-Houthi also said in closing in this diatribe, and I quote, and this is from an official Iranian media source that I'm reading to you from, Press TV, so they quoted him accurately, "Our people today," said al-Houthi, "are ready to play their role at all levels and with everything they can, and they will not be neutral towards the cause of Muslims and the battle to confront the enemy of Muslims." He's talking about Israel. So he is saying, he's laying down the gauntlet. We are ready now to throw our hat in the ring, the Houthis, and start to engage against the enemy of all Muslims, Israel. We won't remain silent in the face of the Zionist entity's aggression. That's new for the Houthis. They've made anti-Israel statements in the past, but this was the most detailed and pointed statement about what the Houthis have planned potentially for Israel and how they are absolutely on the same page as Iran, Hezbollah, and the other proxies that comprise that ring of fire. By the way, this really should come as no shock. The Houthi slogan is, and I quote, "Allah is greater. Death to America, death to Israel, a curse on the Jews, and victory to Islam." Wow, what a catchy jingle. But there you have it, a death to Israel, death to America, and a curse upon the Jews. So this really comes as no surprise. And again, who does that echo? Who does that sound like? Yes, the Houthis' masters in Tehran. Folks, I can tell you that Israel is prepared for this Houthi threat. They are aware of it. There's a reason a few months ago that Israel moved one of its Iron Dome missile defense batteries to the southernmost city of Eilat, because when you get down past Eilat and you go down about 1,000 miles along that Red Sea coast, you have Houthi land in Yemen, in the northern area, northwestern areas of Yemen, in particular. So Israel is very aware the Houthis would make a serious strategic mistake to begin targeting Israel and to not only target Saudi Arabia, but to try to expand their operations. That's one thing. But secondly, folks, it's clear what Iran is doing here. They're creating another southern Lebanon situation, as I said, but they are preparing and arming the Houthis to take part in that coming great conflict, which Israel will be embroiled in against that ring of fire. I call it the Great Northern War, because it will kick off to the north. Hate to say it, but we know it's coming. Let's use common sense here. Anyone with any biblical discernment or any geopolitical common sense can see the writing on the wall that this day is coming. Israel's going to have to face off against Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon and Hezbollah and Iran to the northeast in Syria. But that ring of fire will ignite Hamas and Islamic Jihad to the south, the Houthis to the south in Yemen, perhaps even those Iraqi Shia militias to the east. They will all throw their hats in the ring in an all-out assault against Israel. But here's the good news. Against all odds, Israel will not only survive, it will thrive, because God Almighty still sits on the throne. He neither slumbers nor sleeps, and he observes the enemies of Israel and their evil schemes, and he quite literally laughs. How do I know that? Because the book of Psalms, and I quote, says time after time that God laughs when he sees Israel's enemies plotting and scheming and assembling. So Israel will be just fine, without a doubt. Not only do they have a very good friend up above, but they are prepared here on earth with a very strong military that is well drilled and well prepared for any threats. So you can have peace about this, but we want you to know what's going on because, hey, this is the Watchman Newscast. We want to be watchmen on the wall for you for such a time as this, because you are certainly not hearing this in the mainstream media, but now you know. Hey, thanks for joining us here this week, as always, on the Watchman Newscast. Until next time, have a great weekend. God bless you. And remember, never